Iran's story is inseparable from oil and power. Beneath its arid deserts and windswept plains lies a fortune, the world's fourth-largest oil reserves and second-largest natural gas reserves. For over a century, this resource wealth has been both a blessing and a curse. Oil brought Iran influence and revenue, but it also drew the gaze of foreign powers hungry for control. The pipelines that snake across the landscape are more than just conduits for fuel. They are the arteries of global economics and geopolitics. Yet for decades, Iran's potential has been stifled by sanctions. Imposed by Western powers, sanctions are more than just political statements. They are weapons of economic warfare. They restrict Iran's ability to sell oil, access international banking, and invest in its own future. The result? A nation with immense energy resources, but an economy often gasping for air. Streets once bustling with commerce grew quiet, and ordinary Iranians felt the weight of international pressure in the rising prices of daily necessities. But why such relentless pressure? The answer is as old as the oil wells themselves. Control. In the modern world, to command energy is to command destiny. Nations that can fuel the world hold sway over its future. An Iran that manages its own oil, sets its own prices, and makes its own deals, free from foreign interference, poses a challenge to the established order. For Western powers, maintaining economic dominance has meant keeping Iran from fully exploiting its resources. For Iran, breaking free from this stranglehold has become a matter of national pride and survival. The struggle for control reached a boiling point in 1979. The streets of Tehran surged with protest. For years, Iran had been ruled by the Shah, a monarch propped up by American support. His reign brought modernization, but also repression. Western oil companies thrived, but many Iranians felt their nation's riches slipped through their fingers. The resentment simmered until it erupted in revolution. Amid a sea of chanting crowds and banners, a new leader emerged, Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini. With the Shah fleeing into exile, Khomeini returned from years of banishment, greeted by millions. Overnight, Iran transformed. From a monarchy aligned with the West to an Islamic republic fiercely independent and deeply suspicious of Western intentions. The new government rejected American influence, expelled foreign advisors, and set out to reclaim control over Iran's destiny. The revolution was more than just a change of rulers. It was a rejection of the West's grip on the Middle East. The world watched in shock as protesters stormed the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, taking dozens of Americans hostage. For 444 days, the crisis dominated headlines, poisoning relations for generations. Death to America became a rallying cry, a symbol of defiance and deep-seated anger at decades of foreign interference. This was not just a domestic upheaval. It was a declaration of ideological war. The revolutionaries saw themselves as standing against imperialism, fighting for the right to chart their own course. For the West, Iran's sudden independence was both a strategic loss and a warning. Control is never guaranteed, but Iran's ambitions did not end at its own borders. In the shadows of international politics, Iran's invisible hand began to shape the region. From the Mediterranean to the Arabian Peninsula, Iran built a network of alliances and proxies. In Lebanon, it nurtured Hezbollah, a Shiite militia and political force. In Iraq, it fostered militias that would later rise to prominence after the fall of Saddam Hussein. In Syria, it came to the aid of Bashar al-Assad, sending advisors, fighters, and weapons to preserve its ally. In Yemen, it supported the Houthi movement as they challenged a Saudi-backed government. To its allies, Iran cast itself as a defender of Islam and sovereignty, standing up to foreign aggression and protecting vulnerable communities. To its enemies, these actions looked very different, less like defense and more like interference or even terror. Iran's support for armed groups drew condemnation and counterattacks, fueling a cycle of conflict across the Middle East. Maps of the region reveal the extent of this influence. a web connecting Tehran to Beirut, Damascus, Baghdad, and Sana'a. Each node is a flashpoint, and each alliance a potential spark. Through this network, Iran projects power far beyond its borders, challenging rivals and shaping events in distant capitals. Nowhere is this contest more intense than in Israel. For decades, Iran and Israel have eyed each other with suspicion and fear. Iranian leaders have called for the dismantling of the Zionist state, declaring that Israel has no place in the region. Israel, in turn, sees Iran not just as an adversary, but as an existential threat. The front lines of this conflict stretch from the hills of Lebanon to the alleys of Gaza. Iran funds and arms Hezbollah, whose fighters face off against Israeli forces across a tense border. In Gaza, Iran supports Hamas, a group that has repeatedly clashed with Israel in bloody conflicts. Each missile launched, each drone intercepted, is a reminder of the stakes. For Israelis, the specter of Iranian missiles, nuclear ambitions, and proxy fighters keeps the nation on constant alert. The Iron Dome, Israel's advanced missile defense system, stands as a technological shield against these threats. But technology can only do so much. The tension pulses through every level of society, from military briefings to public protests. On the streets of Tehran, crowds gather to denounce Israel, waving flags and chanting defiance. In Israeli war rooms, generals study maps and intelligence, preparing for whatever may come. Across the region, the echoes of this rivalry fuel instability and shape the choices of other nations. Iran's role in the Middle East is complex, a blend of ambition, ideology, and survival. Its vast oil reserves and energy networks give it leverage, but also make it a target. Its revolution inspired millions, but also isolated it from the world's most powerful economies. Its alliances and proxy networks extend its reach, but also draw it into endless conflicts. Through all of this, Iran remains a nation determined to assert its independence, defend its interests, and challenge the status quo. The struggle over oil, power, and ideology is far from over. Each new crisis, each shifting alliance, is another chapter in a story that continues to shape the fate of the Middle East and the world. Few nations on earth have commanded as much attention, suspicion, and controversy as Iran. With a storied history stretching back thousands of years, the land once known as Persia has long stood at the crossroads of empires, trade routes, and faiths. Its poetry, art, and architecture are revered around the world. Its people, proud and resilient, carry the legacy of conquerors and scholars alike. Yet in the modern era, Iran often appears in headlines as a nation besieged by sanctions, by rhetoric, by the looming threat of war. To understand why so much of the world seems bent on isolating, containing, or even destroying Iran, we must look beyond the headlines and into the heart of what makes this country so uniquely pivotal on the world stage. Begin with geography. Iran commands a strategic position unrivaled by almost any other nation. Stretching across the northern rim of the Persian Gulf, it overlooks the Strait of Hormuz, a narrow waterway through which 1/5 of the world's oil must pass. This slender channel is the planet's most critical energy choke point. In times of tension, Iran's proximity to the strait grants it leverage with global consequences. The mere hint of conflict in the region can send oil prices soaring, rattling financial markets from New York to Beijing. For the world's leading economies, dependent on the free flow of energy, this is a vulnerability few can afford to ignore. But geography alone does not explain Iran's fraught relationship with the West and its neighbors. The roots of mistrust run deep. In the 20th century, Iran was both ally and adversary to the great powers. During the Cold War, it was a bulwark against Soviet expansion, a loyal partner to the United States. But in 1979, the Iranian Revolution swept away the monarchy and established the Islamic Republic, a seismic event that upended not only Iran's internal order, but the entire balance of power in the Middle East. American diplomats were taken hostage. The new leadership denounced Western influence. What followed was a long era of mutual suspicion, proxy conflicts, and diplomatic standstill. Central to the world's anxiety is Iran's nuclear program. Officially, Tehran insists its ambitions are peaceful, aimed at generating electricity and advancing science. Yet since the early 2000s, evidence of covert facilities and enrichment activities has fueled fears that Iran seeks the capability to build nuclear weapons. For Israel, a nation born in the shadow of existential threats, the idea of a nuclear-armed Iran is intolerable. Israeli leaders, from Netanyahu to Barak, have warned that they will act, militarily if necessary, to prevent Tehran from crossing that red line. For the United States and its European allies, the stakes are just as high. A nuclear Iran could trigger an arms race in one of the world's most volatile regions, embolden militant proxies, and undermine the global non-proliferation regime. Sanctions have become the weapon of choice. Over the decades, the United Nations, the United States, and the European Union have imposed layer upon layer of economic restrictions, targeting Iran's banking sector, its oil exports, its ability to access the global financial system. The goal, to pressure Tehran into abandoning its nuclear ambitions and to curb its regional influence. These measures have taken a heavy toll on the Iranian people, causing inflation, unemployment, and shortages of essential goods. Yet, despite the pain, the regime endures, buoyed by a narrative of resistance to foreign domination. But the nuclear issue is only part of a larger story. Iran's foreign policy, fiercely independent, often confrontational, has put it at odds with many of its neighbors. Through its support for groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, and various militias in Iraq and Syria, Iran projects power far beyond its borders. To some, it is a champion of the oppressed. To others, a destabilizing force that fans the flames of sectarian conflict. Sunni Arab kingdoms, especially Saudi Arabia, see Iran as their principal rival for regional supremacy. A struggle that plays out in proxy wars from Yemen to Syria. Then there is the matter of ideology. The Islamic Republic was founded on a vision that rejects Western political and cultural dominance. Its leaders often invoke memories of colonial humiliation, of foreign interventions that shaped Iran's modern history, from the British and Soviet occupation during World War II to the CIA-backed coup that overthrew Iran's democratically elected prime minister in 1953. This legacy of interference has left deep scars, fueling a sense of siege and a determination to chart an independent course. Yet, despite the rhetoric, Iran is not without its backers. Russia and China, both wary of American dominance, have forged closer ties with Tehran, offering investment, military cooperation, and diplomatic support. These relationships complicate any attempt to isolate Iran completely, raising the stakes of any potential confrontation. In the end, the world's desire to destroy Iran is less about annihilation than about containment, about preventing a powerful, independent player from upending a fragile regional order. It is about oil and markets, about ideology and history, about the fear that a defiant Iran could become a model for others who would resist the current global system. But beneath these geopolitical calculations lies a more human story. A nation striving for dignity, security, and a place among the world's great civilizations. Its people yearn for prosperity and peace, even as they endure hardship and isolation. They are shaped by a proud past, yet their future is uncertain, caught between the ambitions of their leaders and the anxieties of the world. So the question remains, is it Iran the world fears? Or the possibility that Iran, unshackled and empowered, could forge a new path for itself and the region? The real story is not one of destruction, but of a struggle for influence, identity, and the enduring quest for sovereignty on the world's most contested stage. The West has deployed nearly every tool at its disposal to isolate and pressure Iran, crippling economic sanctions, diplomatic exclusion, and a barrage of cyber warfare. The intention behind these moves has always been clear: undermine the regime, break the economy, and force a change in leadership. Yet despite these relentless efforts, Iran remains standing. The country is battered, its currency weakened, its streets marked by hardship, and its people enduring the daily consequences of economic siege. The Iranian rial has tumbled in value, inflation soars above 40%, and prices for essentials spiral upward, placing a heavy burden on millions. Food queues snake along city blocks, and black markets bloom in the shadows of closed storefronts. Over a third of the population now lives below the poverty line, a stark reminder of how external punishment can translate into internal suffering. Young people, especially women, face grim prospects, with unemployment rates rising and hope growing thin. Yet through all of this adversity, a sense of defiance endures. On the streets, ordinary Iranians voice their frustrations, sometimes in protest, sometimes in resignation, but always with a resilience that speaks to the country's centuries-old spirit of endurance. The regime, too, remains unbowed, digging in its heels and holding fast to its vision of sovereignty, even as the outside world seeks to bend it to its will. At its heart, the conflict between Iran and the West is not solely about politics or power. It is, in many ways, a clash of civilizations, a deep-seated struggle for identity, values, and the right to define one's own destiny. On one side stands a secular, capitalist West, rooted in Enlightenment ideals and the pursuit of global influence through economic and cultural dominance. On the other is a religious, revolutionary Iran, fiercely protective of its own narrative and determined to chart a course independent of Western dictates. Each side claims a moral high ground. Each side views the other through a lens of suspicion, if not outright hostility. For many in the West, Iran is seen as a destabilizing force, a sponsor of militancy, and an affront to the liberal order. For Iranians, the West represents a centuries-long pattern of interference, exploitation, and hypocrisy, a force intent on subverting their revolution and erasing their culture. The resulting tension is not just geopolitical, but existential. It is a struggle over who gets to define the rules of the international order and whose story gets to be told. But as the pressure from the West intensifies, Iran has not simply retreated into isolation. Instead, it has looked eastward, seeking allies and new opportunities among those who share its skepticism of Western hegemony. In recent years, Iran has strengthened its ties with Russia, China, and the broader global South. The Iran-China 25-year cooperation program, signed in 2021, is emblematic of this shift. Through this agreement, China commits to sweeping investments in Iran's oil, gas, and infrastructure sectors, while securing long-term discounted access to Iranian energy. This partnership is more than transactional. It is strategic, signaling a shared vision of a world no longer dominated by Washington or Wall Street. Russia, too, has positioned itself as both a partner and a potential mediator, maintaining relations with Iran while also engaging Israel and other regional actors. Joint ventures in technology, arms, and even drone development tie these countries closer together, creating a network of resistance to Western pressure. For Iran, these alliances offer not only economic lifelines, but also diplomatic cover and a sense of belonging in a rapidly shifting global landscape. Yet this new order is fraught with danger. Each side in this standoff is heavily armed and deeply distrustful. The region is awash with advanced weaponry, from precision missiles to cyber tools capable of disrupting entire economies. Recent exchanges of military strikes between Iran and Israel have heightened fears of a broader, uncontrollable conflict. The stakes are enormous. Iran is not Iraq. It is larger, more populous, and more deeply embedded in the networks of the modern world. The Strait of Hormuz, a narrow passage through which a significant portion of the world's oil supply flows, sits at the heart of this tension. Any miscalculation, a missile gone astray, a drone shot down, a ship detained, could ignite a conflict that would ripple far beyond the region, threatening global energy markets and drawing in powers from across the world. The specter of war hangs heavy, not because either side desires it, but because the machinery of confrontation is so vast and the room for error so small. And yet, amid the drumbeat of threats and the specter of violence, a question lingers. Could peace still be possible? Beyond the headlines and the hard lines of diplomacy, there are moments of hope. Cultural exchanges, grassroots dialogues, and tentative diplomatic overtures remind us that the stories of nations are always more complex than their governments or their grievances. Iran is not merely a regime or a set of policies. It is a tapestry of people, history, and culture, a civilization with a legacy that stretches back millennia. The world must ask itself, are we truly committed to the destruction of this nation, or are we struggling to control what we fear and do not fully understand? The narrative about Iran, shaped for decades by suspicion and enmity, is not the only story that can be told. Behind the rhetoric and the missiles are ordinary people, families, students, artists, and workers, who dream of a future free from fear and want. Perhaps the true enemies in this long conflict are not nations or leaders, but forces more insidious: fear, pride, and the unyielding pursuit of power. These are the currents that drive nations to confrontation and prevent them from imagining a different, more hopeful future. If there is to be peace, it will require courage, not only from those who lead, but from those who listen, who seek to understand, and who are willing to challenge the narratives that divide us. In the end, the question remains: is Iran a threat to the world, or is it a nation threatened by the world around it? The answer may shape not only the fate of one country, but the future of the entire region, and perhaps the world itself.